Hello, and welcome to this Security and CDO Magazine sponsored webinar focused on the organizational aspects of unwinding data silos in complex, hybrid, and multi-cloud companies. I'm Jocelyn Houle, your moderator today, and I'm really pleased to welcome Shravan Kasarla, Chief Data Officer of Thrivent, and Mukul Kumar, a longtime CISO investor and advisor to many data startups here in Silicon Valley. We're looking forward to a conversation today that will outline why data silos are a problem, what kinds of organizational structures work together with technology tools to address these concerns. And of course, we'll have to touch on generative AI, as does every other webinar in the last few months. Throughout this webinar, we will also pause to take your questions and to answer questions at the end as well. So please feel free to continue to set your questions in the QA section of your Zoom. Before we go to the more formal agenda and talking points, I'd love to get a little context, Shravan, on your role and on what Thrivent does.
Thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you, CDO Magazine and Security, to bring this opportunity for us to have a chat with the rest of the community. So coming to Thrivent, I'll first introduce Thrivent and then my role at Thrivent. I know Thrivent is a Fortune 500 company, 120 years young. So not really has been Midwest-based, but now we focus across the nation. Our unique offering is we believe money is a tool, not a goal. I think that's at the center of how we operate as a company and how we are always a purpose-driven company and a membership-owned organization. So we're driven by that higher purpose. We offer a range of financial service offerings, starting with advice, holistic financial advice, so that our members and the clients can make most out of what they have been given. And of course, investments. Thrivent has very highly rated mutual funds that we make it part of offerings for our clients, and insurance. So life, health, annuities, as well as banking and generosity. As I mentioned, Thrivent has that higher purpose, being a fraternal organization, having a shared purpose. We also have big offerings around generosity, variety of solutions and programs that give our clients an opportunity to make a difference in the community and in the world. So that's what Thrivent is all about. And my role at Thrivent as a Chief Data Officer is to create a trusted data as a platform. So it's a trusted data as a platform so that business outcomes, experiences, and also, of course, deeper insights, actionable deeper insights can be enabled. I'm sure that's going to be at the center of topic. I'll expand on that one as I go to see how do we address those silos in the organization. Are silos good? Are silos bad? What do we mean by creating or breaking down silos? We'll talk about that most, and that's where we are headed, is to really address that. That's my role, responsibility is to address that through the means of whether it's analytics, whether it is data, whether it is generative AI, all of these things at the core.
Thank you so much. That's great. It's really interesting to hear about your focus, laser-like focus on the strategic asset of data at Thrivent. Mukul, you have had roles at all different companies and have an expanded perspective too, coming from the CISO role. So I thought I would just start with you on the next question, just to level set. What are these data silos exactly? And we've always had data silos in every organization. So what's different right now?
Yeah, let me take a stab at that question. Data silos, like you said, always existed. And to be fair, no companies wants intentionally to create the data silos. But what has recently changed? Let's look at that last 1 decade. Cloud computing. Cloud computing is the first one that has a major impact on data sprawl, I would say. That provides data storage, access opportunities, enabling organization to bring that data access multiple clouds. That's one that has recently changed. I would add to that the second, I would say, big data, the data volume, the velocity, and the variety have increased tremendously, where what we have seen a decade before that. Now companies have access to vast amount of data, which is structured, unstructured data, making and managing and driving meaningful insights from that. So that has changed in recent past. Third, I would say advanced analytics or AI-driven technologies have impact. Now companies are using advanced analytics and AI to extract much more meaningful, valuable insight from the data. That's third, which have recently changed. And not limited to this one, I'm just putting a very high level context to this stage. The third, I would say, the competitive advantage right now in many industries, data-driven insights have become a very significant source of competitive advantage, right? Organizations have started harnessing data more effectively to better position themselves and innovate and respond to the market. And the fourth one, I would say, regulation and compliance have played a very important role in last decade. Data privacy regulation, not only data regulation, privacy laws, privacy regulations, such as we all know about GDPR, CCPA, that emphasizes on a proper data management and protection. So that's what I would say, 4 or 5 bullet points, very high level, that what has changed. Shravan, please
great.
feel free to comment.
Yeah, no, I great kind of overview. I've worked in data for the majority of my career in tech, and even I find myself not fully comprehending the volume and velocity until I sit in some of these conversations with our customers, right? And I would say that I'm a kind of expert, but even I have to say, wow, sometimes when I think about where all the sensitive data is, the data we don't even know about. You know, I think that a lot of our customers have seen like cloud data was just this exciting thing 5 years ago, and it was like everybody jump in the pool. And now there's a step back where you know, there's concerns around that need to be addressed without slowing anybody down. I sort of feel like there's two communities in enterprise, the like speed racers and the traffic cops, and for data. And so how do we kind of, if you were to align the speed racers who want to, as you said, use data for innovation, and then the full-time obligation, you know, traffic cops who in privacy compliance, other places who want to meet obligations, if you were to align those, what, you know, what would be the capabilities? And Shravan, I'm going to start with you. What would need to be true? Let's say everybody got along and we all agreed, yep, we're going to get rid of these silos. What kinds of things would an enterprise want to have true?
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, thanks, Mukul, for really outlining what changed, what really, why are we here as talking about silos versus the platforms itself. So Justin, what I would like to address is really that I think if the word silos is actually giving a bad connotation. Here's where I call it. Business areas, as they're running their business, they need operational data. They collect operational data. They need to be able to see where they are going in the moment. So that's not a silo. That is by design that each business areas or each areas need to both produce and utilize data and maybe have to do a little bit of processing around it so that they can actually use it. So I think it's unfair to call them just silos, and not every silo is bad. Yes, when is it a silo and when is it really a federated capability that the business need to use? I think that's where the really driving need to be from the, whether it is the chief data officer or from a data organization as a whole, should be aggregated data. Don't create multiple copies of that. There is no reason to bring enterprise data multiple places, multiple teams. But if you have your business functional specific data, let's call it local data versus enterprise data for a quick minute. Your local data, I think that's where you can now reduce that conflict or reduce that friction between wanting common data platform and also being able to go, whether you call them speed racers or whether you want the insight in the moment, data usage and insights or decisions or experiences in the moment. I think there is a need for both of them. What
Oh,
I think what a point from Mukul identifies is the technology has changed, right? Volume, velocity, and variety of data change. But also cloud gave that, yes, while cloud is easy to create more copies and more silos, but it also gave a capability of, without a much effort, bring the data together because not everybody needs final, simplified, model structured data. They need to be able to use the data. Data has a use from the get-go, meaning data as it's produced, data as it's curated, and data as it's organized for a purpose. I think that's where the platform approach of today makes it that it continues to provide that and meet the need of both conflict of common data as well as the platform.
Yeah, that's really helpful and strategic insight. And I love both of you have kind of touched on this, this tension where at the business level, locally, there's the real like crisp, fresh knowledge of the business. And that's the context for the data that we've always relied on. At the same time, at an enterprise level, you need a consistent way to understand data context. And if you had told me there was a way to do that 10 years ago, I would say, well, sure, get out your pencil and paper and your spreadsheets, right? Because you're going to have to talk to everybody. But we've had some real technological changes and classification. Mukul, I'm going to ask you a question about classification pretty soon, maybe from your experiences, certainly from a security perspective. Most of the companies, once let's say they can find all their data, which many cannot, and then they want to add classification to understand what's sensitive, where is the data of interest, so that they can act upon it in some way.
Yeah.
Now, classification is such a good example because the business units have sometimes a way of talking about the very same data that can be quite different from the enterprise view. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, didn't mean to cut you off either. Sorry about that. But when you said a lot many organizations know what data set, I smile a little bit because that's the biggest challenge. What you said is true for many organizations, might be in that bucket, but that's the biggest challenge to catalog your data. The aspect of cataloging means different for different industry vertical. For a manufacturing vertical, intellectual property would be important. For banking and finance, something else would be important. So that's the first part, like you said, knowing the data where it is. Like it could be privacy related, intellectual property, third party IP, financial information, you name it. Different industry verticals have different requirements. So that's the first aspect of it, how an organization can look at it, to catalog it. Once you catalog it, you know where your data resides. That's fair. And now, what do you do with that? Now you know where data resides. Then comes the second layer of organizational requirement, which you briefly touched upon, is tagging. Before tagging, I would say classification comes into picture because that's an important aspect. Without the classification, it would be really hard for data to be tagged properly. Classification, I'm referring to in terms of keeping it very simple, meaning it's publicly facing document or information, or it's internal only, or it's restricted, and so on. Yeah, so that's what you're highlighting. So for the organizations to the capabilities when we are talking about for the companies to manage and control the data are I would say very high level. First, like you said, catalog your data, know what's important for you, where you're keeping that data. That's one. Overlay that with your data classification. That's, I would say, that's second. The third, which you briefly touched upon as well, tag the data appropriately. That way, a couple of things would come out of that. Tangible benefit that will come. First, coming from a CISO's world, that makes it life easier for the cybersecurity team to tag the data when it's leaving the organization intentionally, unintentionally.
Yeah.
Because if its data is tagged properly, we know instead of protecting everything under the sun, we'd say, all right, we'll just focus on things that are important to us. So that would do that. The second aspect from the privacy lens, it would make it privacy team much more happier to know where the governance and compliance team much more happier. They would know where the data is related to the compliance. Many compliance restricts the access to the data and so on. Mm-hmm. So I would say that's
so a single view, this consistency, though it's hard to get, can identify the data that you want to act upon, either to protect it or to leverage it for new product offerings at the line of business. I've heard some people say like, oh, data detection and classification, everybody does it. But I'd love to get you guys' opinion. Like, how do you think about accuracy? How important? It seems like that's the baseline. Like everything kind of comes out of inventory and classification. How do you figure out what's accurate?
Yeah, Jocelyn, if I may jump in here. So just one thing I see, there is a different dimension. I know from a CISO perspective. So I think it's in a good way that Mukul I'm talking about. I know you talked about all the aspects of the classification from a sensitive data perspective. From a data lens and from a business outcome lens, I see this another dimension of classification is what data is your crown jewel? What's most important and also can create impact, whether it's client data. I think for almost every business or even in nonprofit, who are you serving? I think data about the clients, data about your products and services, and data about your whoever is your sales organization selling it. I think there's going to be a little bit differences between the industries, but identifying those key enterprise domains and then now start applying this kind of again, where you should go provide more autonomy to the federated areas, where you want to actually bring it into the platform with the common standards and applying the common classification, creating the privacy. I think we need to add the data piece of it, not only things around the data. I mean, I just wanted to add that to see
Yeah,
that.
I love that. And I think that also kind of comes together. Now, I'm going to say what I'm hearing here is like identify those crown jewels. I understand what's most important, which somebody can't do that yet, but find it if you can, and you make sure that you are managing this tension between the business and managing obligations. So with that in mind, let me just say, we now know there's a lot of different silos. What would be best is having a single view. To start that, you have to understand where your crown jewels are and what you want to do with it, like protect it or leverage it for a use case. But now I'm going to move into taking all that into account. We're going to talk a little bit about the multiplier effect of generative AI, right? So we know we've had to treat data as a platform. I think that's really the one takeaway here. So I'd love to ask both of you, and I'm going to start with you, Mukul, which is, there's a million things to say here. I think we've all understood that large language models kind of pop all the pieces out of the puzzle because they don't forget. Sensitive data may go into a model and not come out, or has a different type of outcome. If you were sitting with, say, like your CISO self or one of your CISO colleagues, what would you tell them? Like, here's 3 things that I want you to really think about now as we are just starting to understand data risks in Gen AI.
I would slice this question into 2 buckets. Let's look at from the CISO's lens, the CISO's perspective. First, then we'll go on to the product and the business side. For the CISOs, the biggest challenge is data privacy and content that goes out on these Gen AI platforms. Knowingly, unknowingly, that becomes a problem. So having a standard policy at the organization level, that's really important to understand. And what is ethically and a responsible use by the employees of the users of an organization. So that's important for the CISO. We touched upon data privacy and content, which is in many cases organizations have started leveraging to use Gen AIs for creating the code for debugging purposes or doing the research purposes. So plagiarism, all those components related to cybersecurity comes into picture. Data loss, knowingly, unknowingly, somebody posting or pasting the information in the Gen AI platform. So restricting online and inline, restricting that capabilities and still giving the freedom to the users to use the platform. That comes for the CISO's perspective. We talked about data privacy and content. From a business side, I would say Gen AI has the potential, but has also have created a lot more data-driven, diverse representation of the data set because it's so the whole Gen AI model requires diverse representation. It needs a lot of data to be trained, right? That which should be unbiased and all inclusive. So that's from the business perspective, the challenge that we see.